Here's my tiny chunk of the jungle. In it I have snake plants, ponytails, ZZs, ficus, and even monsteras in propagation. Today I'm going to share with you how I make sure I don't kill these natural wonders. These are the top 7 things you may be doing that you don't even know is killing them. Stay with me until the end, and I guarantee the last tip will take your houseplant journey to another level. A while back I received a question on social media from a newbie plant parent who recently started their own private houseplant collection. And they were having issues with a couple of their plants and wanted me to help them diagnose the problem, which I'm happy to do, so let me know in the comments if I can help you too. Now, most of the time when I get these types of questions, they'll provide me with what they're seeing. It may be something like yellow leaves, poor growth, the tips are burned, or maybe even the leaves are wilted. These are definitely symptoms that let us know that we should look into it a little further. But the part we're missing with these descriptions is that we're not looking at the entire plant. Most importantly, the roots and soil. The bottom half of the plant tells us the other part of the story, which in some cases is more important. The first thing I ask or look at myself when trying to figure out what could be wrong with a plant is to remove the pot and look at the roots and soil closely. Look to see if the roots are firm and, with most plants, tan or white in color, or are they darker, soft and mushy with a foul smell to them, in which case you may have root rot. Also, check to see if the plant is root bound. You can do this by looking at the amount of roots in relationship to soil. If there are a lot of roots and they're circling, it may be root bound. Keeping in mind that some plants like snake plants and ZZs like to be a little snug in the pot. Another thing to look at when you're examining the soil is to see if the soil is compact. Your roots may not be circling, but if the soil is compact, then it has poor aeration, which basically means the roots are not getting the oxygen they need. If you do notice your soil is compact and can't do the repot right away, you could provide a temporary fix by poking the soil from above to provide some aeration, and this will also help better hydrate the soil, which at this point may be hydrophobic, which basically means that the soil is difficult to re-wet. Okay, so all this talk about soil takes us to the next thing that could put me on the houseplant most wanted list for killing them. But I don't end up there, and that's because I always make sure my pots have this one thing. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You walk into a garden center and see a pot that you know would look great for that special plant at home or a plant you're buying. I have to buy it, but before I do, I always make sure that the pot has one thing, and that one thing is drainage holes. Always look for drainage holes. This drainage allows excess water to flow out of the pot, which allows the soil to maintain proper aeration and prevent root rot. So what if you find a pot and it doesn't have drainage holes? You can drill holes in the pot, which depending on the material can be difficult, or you can use it as a catch pot to put your plants in. When I use it as a catch pot, I just make sure that the nursery pot the plant is in has drainage holes. And in this situation, the only thing I do different is that when I top water, I check that the water hasn't accumulated in the catch pot. If it does, it's simple. Just toss out the water and put the plant back in. And since we're still talking about soil, so I can be a good plant parent and keep my plants alive, I always repot my plants to a pot that's just slightly larger than the pot the plant is in now. So if, for example, I have a 4-inch plant, I'll repot it into a 6-inch pot. By doing this, I can prevent overwatering, which is a certain way to get root rot. You see, when the pot is much larger than the root system, the excess soil holds more water than the plant can take up. And this just leads to waterlogged conditions, and as I said before, root rot can quickly set in. Now, we all know pruning is part of caring for our plants. It's essential to promote healthy growth, remove dead or diseased parts, and to take cuttings to propagate. But sometimes improper pruning can send your houseplant to the big garden in the sky. To avoid this, what I do is always make sure I use sharp tools and always sterilize my pruners, scissors, or blades when using them from one plant to the next. Plants are a lot like us, and just like we should wash our hands to prevent the spread of disease, we should do the same for them. I like to do this by having a small spray bottle with isopropyl alcohol on my workbench, and when I'm going to use my pruners, I simply spray the blades and wipe them down. It's simple. Also, it's important to know about the specific pruning needs for all your plants. Some plants, it's okay to prune them all the way back, leaving them with no leaves and they still bounce back. Others would be better off pruning them and making sure that at least one leaf remains on the plant. And this brings me to my next point, which is to take a little time to learn what are the specific needs of your plants. It doesn't have to be complicated. When I get a new plant that I don't know much about, I simply do a quick search online and find out what the watering, lighting, temperature, fertilizer, and pruning requirements are for that specific houseplant and follow those guidelines. When I notice one of my plants is struggling, it's usually one or two things that are off, and knowing the environment that my plant prefers helps me to adjust and grow a nicer, healthier plant. I can tell you that when I started going to a chunkier soil mix for some of my pothos and philodendrons, one of the learning curves that I had to overcome was adjusting my watering frequency and method. I bottom water my houseplants for the most part, and when using a chunkier mix, this method doesn't work as well since the soil has a harder time wicking the water all the way to the top. So I found myself having to top water and pay closer attention to these plants with the chunkier mix. Anyways, take a little time to learn about your plant. The good news is that whatever you learn from this one plant will serve you to better care for the next, even if you kill it. Sometimes we learn more from our failures than our successes. They force us to really think about what happened, and working with plants is a lot like that. We learn a lot about them and ourselves. Now let's talk a little about water and how you may be harming your plants. We know they need it, and so does every other living creature on this great planet we live on. But there are a few ways that water could cause harm to your plants. Sometimes quickly, and sometimes so slow we don't even notice it. Using water that's too cold or too hot is definitely one way that we could quickly cause damage to our roots. I always aim to use water that's room temperature, somewhere between 62 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit or 17 to 22 degrees Celsius. Also, in regards to using tap water, I use it on all my plants except for the fussier ones like Calathea, Spath, and spider plants. Most tap water is safe to use, but if you find that yours is not, then you can use rainwater, distilled, or even install an RO system, which is what I did to use on my more delicate plants. Watering your plants after you fertilize them with liquid or water-soluble fertilizer is another way you could be reducing or limiting the amount of nutrients your plants are receiving. It's always good practice to water your plants first and then apply the fertilizer. You may think you're doing everything right. You measured just the right amount of fertilizer, mixed it up, and poured it over the soil of your plant. Now you're going to water, so you water it as you should, and what happens? The fertilizer comes pouring out of the drainage holes, and depending on the amount of water you use to water your plant with, it diluted the fertilizer or maybe even caused it all to run out. The better way to do this is to water first and then apply the fertilizer. Or what I do to do both at once and give a healthy dose of fertilizer to my plants is that I use a combination of bottom and top watering. I do this by placing my plant in a bowl and watering it with my fertilizer solution from the top, letting the excess solution flow out of the bottom until I have a pool of solution in the bowl. I then let the plant sit in the bowl for about 5 minutes to soak it up. This allows me to speed up the watering process when compared to just bottom watering, and this way I make sure the soil is completely saturated with all the nutrients in the water the plant needs. If you decide to use this method, I recommend you cut the rate of fertilizer in half, and regardless of the method you use, I also recommend you leach the soil once every 1 to 2 months to remove any excess salts that may build up from your water or fertilizer applications. To do this, it's easy. I take my plant into the shower or to a garden hose outside and water the plant with a volume of water that's at least twice the size of the container. So if the plant is in a 1-gallon pot, then I water with 2 gallons of water and let the water flow through the drainage holes. This helps prevent excess salts from building up over time. If you're a beginner, and even if you're not, the best advice I can give you to make sure you get the most of this enjoyable plant journey and kill the least amount of plants is to choose those plants that are easy. There are tons of plants out there, and I know you want them all, but at first, give the easy ones a try. Maybe try a snake plant, a ZZ, a pothos, or a cast iron plant. Start with these so you can learn and build your confidence in caring for plants, and as you gain experience, then move on to some of the others. If for some reason you fail or you struggle with one of these easier plants, don't give up and learn from your experiences. This is how I do it. This is even how the pros do it. Also, the other recommendation I can make is to choose the plants that are best suited for your environment. If you're looking to buy a plant and it requires higher lighting conditions and you don't have a bright window or not willing to invest in a grow light, then choose those plants that do well in lower lighting conditions. Want to see my top recommendations for plants that are great for low light areas? Then click this video to watch it now.